Welcome, everybody. My name is Melinda Laz. I am the Outreach Education Manager at the Boulder Museum of Contemporary Art, and I'm here today at the Englewood Public Library to present a program speaking about our current exhibition up at the museum and provide you with a demonstration of an art project you can do in your own home. The library will have a limited number of art kits available, so after watching this, swing by the library and pick up a kit. I'm going to share my screen and talk about our exhibition. Let me move this a little bit. Here we go. Today we're going to talk about the stubborn influence of painting, which is on view at the Boulder Museum of Contemporary Art now through September 6th. This show has been guest curated by Kate Petley. I'm going to take you through the exhibit, one gallery at a time. So here we go. This show is an interesting mix of different artists and different artworks. And although the title of the show is called The Stubborn Influence of Painting, there are actually no real paintings in the show. I'm going to just quickly read to you the little description that was written by Kate Petley to describe the show. Bringing together a diverse group of 9 artists from around the US and London, this exhibition examines how the history of painting acts as a silent collaborator in the work of artists who create in other mediums. The influence of painting connects these artists directly and indirectly, establishing common ground in unexpected ways. So you will see the list of 9 artists who are included in this show, and their artwork ranges from ceramics to recycled mixed media pieces to photography to fiber art. So let's talk about the work. As you step into the gallery, the first grouping of artworks that you see are some ceramic forms created by artist Naomi Cohen. She originally lived in Boulder. Now she lives elsewhere, but she was very thrilled to be included in this exhibition. It was kind of a homecoming for her. In addition to these really lovely monumental forms, she had these custom wooden tables created as pedestals for her work, and they're at different heights. The idea is that she wants you to peer inside her vessels. There are holes inside some of them. There are textures. There are things sort of hidden at the bottom of them. Let me advance the screen so you can see them a little closer. As you can see, she's using different kinds of mark making. So again, if you're thinking about how painting is playing a role in her work, she's using splatter paint. She's using polka dots. She's limiting her colors to black and white in some of the vessels, and in other ones, there's lots of different colors. Some of her vessels have very graphic kinds of line work, and other pieces are just a real layering of one color on top of another. Here's a couple more close-ups so you can get a really good view. They're very sturdy, even though they're made of ceramic. They're very masterfully created. And I just love the size differences and color differences. And these tables are also really just lovely. It's a nice contrast between her work and the wooden tabletop. Our next artist is Stephen Frost. Stephen Frost is a professor at CU Boulder, and His project will be our inspiration for our art project, which I'll talk about a little later in this presentation. This is a very interesting artwork with an interesting story about it. So I'm going to tell you the story. The title of this piece is called After Dorothea Rockburn. And it's a very, very large weaving. It's about 8 feet long. Actually, here, let me advance the slide so you can see the relation to a person standing there. So the story about this artwork is that Stephen did some research about this woman, Dorothea Rockburn. The well-known artist Robert Rauschenberg did a painting that used a quilt that he stole from Dorothea Rockburn. They knew each other, and he took this lovely quilt that she had made, and Stephen revealed that he thought she had even made it for one of her babies. And he took this quilt and made a work of art that ended up selling for a lot of money. The artwork featured a quilt on the bottom and paint drips all along the top. Stephen decided he wanted to give this quilt back to her, give Dorothea's name a moment in history, because she was never credited with making this quilt. So this piece is an homage to her. So on the right side, I'll use my cursor here. This right section is referring to her quilt. So these little individual sections of weaving, those are like quilt squares. And then this left section is referring to the paint drips that Rauschenberg created on his final painting. He's a very community-oriented artist, so he likes to get used fibers and fabrics from people. It's a little hard to see if I give you this closer up view. You can see there's all sorts of things dangling from the front part of the weaving. There are knots that he's tied on, and he's got tassels hanging and clumps of yarn. There are blue jean pieces. There are pieces of t-shirts and sequins. There's a belt along here at the bottom that he's woven in. So the idea is that these are using materials that we all have and people give him. And so it's sort of like the essence of the community is also in this quilt, or in this weaving. Our next artist on view is Gayla Penn. These are mixed media constructions. I'm going to let you look at them for just a moment. You're probably scratching your head and thinking, what are those made of? So let's look a little closer at a couple of them. So Gayla Penn, much like Stephen Frost, likes to use reclaimed materials. So in the gallery, you can step fairly close to these, and you'll notice that these are made of basically what we might call trash. So we've got trash bags, we've got pieces of plastic, fish netting, all sorts of different types of plastics you might find on packaging, pieces of labels. These little black splotches are, again, pieces of a black trash bag. And if we were to look at it very, very close, they are attached with staples, but from far away, it looks like they've been stitched on. So on the surface, these pieces are, you know, made of fairly simple found objects, but the idea, bringing it back to the idea of painting, is that in a painting, you layer. You put one layer of color down and then you let it dry and you add another layer and you're building up the surface. Sometimes you want to add textures in different ways or use mixed media to add patterns. So Gayla Penn is doing that with these found objects, and creating these very lovely layered effects stapled right against the gallery wall. Let's move on to our next artist, Gary Noland. Like Gay Pen, he is also a found objects artist. So each of these artworks are made of materials that he found in a dumpster or a trash can. I'm only going to talk about a couple of these, so I'll advance the slide. So on the right, we have two doors that he found on the right, two doors that he found in a dumpster, and he grabbed them and he sanded them to bring out the wood grain. Then he added on top these kind of geometric shapes that reference the wood grain. They are made of contact paper. So if you think about that paper that you might put as a drawer liner inside your kitchen cabinet, well, he's creating artwork out of that. So that idea that you're just using simple materials to create something kind of interesting, and you might scratch your head to say, well, how did he do that? Sometimes in painting, artists like to trick your brain a little bit to say, well, how did they do that? How did they get that mark? On the left, this grouping of pieces are made of foam. I believe it's the type of foam you might find in a boat. And he again found them in a dumpster. They had a lot of textures on them from being out in the weather and worn. And all of these colorful, they look like polka dots, those are marbles. And he has created a glue and shoved all these marbles together onto this foam. So it's really kind of an exciting piece because it's about texture and layering and mark making. But again, it's that unexpected surprise of seeing something that you recognize in there and that you can identify, but from far away, you don't really understand what it might be made of. Our next artist is Alexandria Hedeson. She is a photographer. And this group of work is quite interesting and again, unexpected. And just when you think you know what's going on, you look at another one and you're just not quite sure. So she was in Paris and was fascinated by the window displays in the Paris neighborhoods. So when a store is changing over to a new business or they've gone out of business, they paint using this watered down white chalky paint. They paint the inside of the windows so that it obscures the view from the public. So she walked by these windows and loved the different mark makings. And it's almost like an artist has his own handwriting. Each of these were painted in different ways. This one has a wide brush. This one is a little bit more streaky. The one that we just looked at before was kind of a rounded process. So she was really intrigued by capturing these little moments in time through these window displays. And of course, over time, there are workers inside. They might rub against the inside of the window and change that mark, or someone comes along, in the case of this red, someone might come along and put a poster over the window and then rip it off. So she's captured all of these really just moments in time through these windows. Our next artist is Altoon Sultan. She is an artist who lives in Vermont, and she does a lot of different art forms, but for this particular show, we're focusing on her rug hookings. So rug hooking is a very sort of traditional craft, and she has really taken it to the next level. She hand dyes all of her wool. So she picks her color palette. She's really known for these very detail-oriented geometric shapes, not just in these pieces, but in her other work as well. Rug hooking is a process where you take a long string and you take a hook tool and you punch in and then pull out. And what you're doing is you're creating these little loops. If you look down at this bottom piece on the right, you can see the little textures in there, and they really look like brush strokes. So although it's made of fibers, it has that similar element of an individual brush stroke being made. Similarly, we have Philip Augustin, who is an artist from New Mexico. And he is a photographer who works again with shape and value. So these are darkroom based photographs where he's exposing the light in different ways to create these different shapes. It's a very complex process that, in all honesty, I don't exactly know how he creates them, but the shapes that he has created and the layering of the lights and the darks and the rich black tones, they're really lovely, and I love how the curator has displayed them in this way. And I'll move on to another photographer in the show named Nikolai Ishkuk, originally from Russia, but now living in London. Just as we just saw in Philip Augustin's work, this is another darkroom artist who is working with light and shadow. He is using a specialized photo paper. You notice that it looks like kind of like a quilt, where they're all individually made up pieces of paper. He's attaching them on the back with special linen tapes. And again, the richness of the tone and the different color values he's achieved in the darkroom is pretty amazing. This is a paper that's no longer available. So these are very unique, original pieces that can't ever be reproduced. Our final artist for the show is a video artist. So again, if we think about, well, we're talking about painting, what does video have to do with it? So this is a work by Peter Campus, who is a very well-known video artist. He has taken an 8-minute video. It's on a loop. There's also a soundtrack. This is a video of the Long Island Sound. It's called Night Buoy. And right in the middle here, you see this kind of rounded shape. It's essentially a video of this buoy floating in the water, but what he's done is he has slowed down the pixels and he's blown them up so that they are as big as, if you think about, like bigger than a grapefruit. So very, very large pixels. And again, similar to Altoon Sultan and her rug hooking sort of dot images, Peter Campus is using the pixels to create that sort of pointillism view as well. Every once in a while in this video, you'll see a dot fly by and it's a bird or a wave in the water. The soundtrack going is of listening to water. So it's actually quite meditative. And it's really lovely with all the different colors that get shown through. So that's the end of the presentation. Again, our show, The Stubborn Influence of Painting, is on view through September 6th. We're on 13th and Arapahoe Street in Boulder. And we'd love to have you come up and see the show in person. I want to thank the Scientific and Cultural Facilities District. They help us keep all of our education programs free. Now I'm going to transition and show you Just give me 1 second here to stop sharing my screen. I think I hid it behind here. There we go. Okay. I'm going to transition and I'm going to show you a demonstration of our weaving project. Here is an example of something we'll be creating today. If you're able to pick up a kit from the library, you'll be given a pre-strung loom. It's just a cardboard loom. There are some pieces of cardboard pushed up at the top and the bottom. And I'm going to give you a little demonstration. Let me turn my camera down this way. All right, so here are some materials that you'll find in your kit. We're going to give you a few of these loops. They're just cotton loops that you might use for making pot holders. You're just going to want to cut that loop so that it's one long piece. So we'll give you a couple of those. We'll give you a few pieces of yarn and even a strip of fabric or two. And some other materials that you might choose to use. If you have a plastic fork at home or a regular fork, that would work. And a pair of scissors. And last but not least, if you have a needle at home that has a large eye, that might come in handy, although it's not necessary. So this is very simple weaving, and we are referring to the artwork that we just looked at by Stephen Frost. His weavings are very, I'm calling it kind of rustic. He likes to make little knots in different places. He likes to leave pieces of thread hanging. He likes to stop and start in the middle. So this is not going to be a very, very formal kind of weaving. This is about having fun and exploring materials. So let's start. I'm going to recommend that you start at the bottom. You'll take your first thread. You'll start at the end and you'll go under, over, under, over, and you'll continue that pattern all the way across until you get to the opposite side. And I would pull it out just a little bit. You're going to use your fork if you have one to push it down. Okay. Now you've got to do something with this little end. You need to tuck it back around the other side. So come underneath it and you can leave it there. You could bring it back a little further. Again, there's not too many rules. We do want to make sure that our weaving will stay together though. So it's good to tuck that piece around. Now we're going to do the opposite pattern to make our second stitch. So we started by going under, over, under, over. Now we're going to go over, under, over, under, and continue that pattern until you are done with your thread. And now you'll use your fork or your hands to push it down. So you've done your first 2 stitches. Notice how they're opposite each other. So if I try to pull this apart, they're kind of locked in. Our next pass through goes back to the first pattern. So you're always reversing your pattern. So just repeat your pattern. If you started over under, the second one will be under over, then you'll go back to over under. You'll see it visually. I'm just going to do one more pass through and then we'll end it here and let you explore your own creativity. So I have my little tail here. I'm going to tuck this around, and I'm going to let this one just hang out because I like it hanging out there. Now I'm going to do my third pass through. I'm going to go back to my under, over, under, over. I'll do that all the way across. And push down. So the idea is that you are using the materials in whatever way that you want. Again, I'll show my little example here. You can braid materials. This is using some paper twine. We've got lace. We've got thin yarns and thick yarns, all in the same weaving. Now to take this off, you're going to start at the bottom here. Actually, I'll use this example to show you directly. You will start at the bottom, so keep the top part on. At the bottom, you're going to start by cutting your first loop. I would recommend you slide this out of there to do this. You're going to tie your first 2 strings together in a knot. You might need to give yourself a little more room than I did. So I tied 1 and 2 together in a double knot. Now I'm going to go through and tie 3 and 4 together, and so on until you get all the way across. Then you'll do the same thing at the top. So when you're done, you'll have your piece that you can use as a little wall hanging or something that you can put on your table or however you'd like to use it. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks to the Englewood Library for hosting our program, and we hope to see you next time.